I froze in the hallway, clutching Sophie to my chest as if I could shield her from the entire world. Her little arms wrapped around my neck, warm and trembling. And for one terrifying second, I thought she might cry. My heart hammered so hard I was afraid Brandon could hear it through the bedroom door. "Mommy, where are we going?" Sophie whispered, her big brown eyes glistening with the kind of innocence that shatters your soul. I pressed my lips to her hair. "Just hold on to me, sweetheart. I'll tell you later." Behind me, Ethan stood like a soldier, his 13-year-old hands gripping the duffel bag that held the only pieces of our life I dared to take: clothes, birth certificates, and the small envelope of cash I had hidden for weeks. His face was pale, but determined. He had learned too early how to read the danger in this house, how to step silently when Brandon was home. We moved down the hallway slowly, every step deliberate, like thieves in our own lives. From behind the bedroom door came the deep, uneven sound of Brandon snoring. He had been celebrating a promotion that night, though celebrating in his language meant drinking until the world blurred and then picking a fight with me because his shirt wasn't pressed right or because dinner wasn't warm enough. I paused at the front door, holding Sophie tight as I glanced back. Ethan nodded. No words. We couldn't risk them. I reached for the doorknob, my fingers trembling. For one horrifying second, it squeaked. My breath hitched, but the snoring continued, slower, heavier. Thank God. I pulled the door open and slipped out into the cool night. The air hit my face like freedom and fear mixed into one. I strapped Sophie into her car seat while Ethan climbed into the back beside her, keeping one protective arm across her lap like he had practiced this moment in his head. "You okay?" I whispered. He gave a tight nod. When I slid into the driver's seat, I realized my hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. My life with Brandon flashed in that small trembling motion. Our first date, when he listened to me talk about teaching music as if I were the most interesting person on earth. The first bouquet of flowers he ever gave me, a promise of forever. Then the first time his fist connected with my cheek because he saw a text from an old college friend. I had told myself it was stress. I had told myself it would get better. But it never did. It only got worse. Brandon was a former police officer. Even after he was suspended for unnecessary force, he carried himself like the law belonged to him alone. Once, when I threatened to leave, he leaned in close and whispered, "If you call the cops, your boy won't live to see the morning." I believed him. But tonight, I had something I hadn't had before. Hope. A month of secret planning, of hiding money from grocery cashbacks, of selling my beloved piano, my last link to the woman I used to be. Tonight, I finally took the children and left. As I drove away, Sophie snuggled into her blanket and whispered, "Mommy, it's dark." "It's okay, baby. It's just nighttime. You can sleep." Ethan leaned forward from the back seat. "Mom, is he going to come after us?" I glanced at his reflection in the mirror, seeing too much of Brandon in his eyes, but also something Brandon never had. Compassion. "No, honey. Not tonight. We're going somewhere he can't find us." And I prayed I was telling the truth. The highway opened ahead of us, and with each passing mile, the weight on my chest eased just enough for me to breathe again. Behind me, my children slept. Ahead, the unknown waited. And maybe, just maybe, a second chance at life. I used to believe Brandon was my safe place. That thought feels laughable now. But back then, I thought I had found my forever. We met on a dating site when I was 26, a music teacher still carrying student loans and a heart too eager to trust. His profile showed a confident man with kind eyes and a grin that promised security. He loved classical music, fine wine, photography, things that made him seem cultured and steady. He wrote, "I'm looking for a woman who values family, loyalty, and honesty." I should have read that last word twice. Our first date was in a quiet coffee shop downtown. Brandon listened with this laser focus as I rambled about teaching piano to kids who couldn't sit still, about my dream to open a music studio one day. He held my hand by the second date and kissed me under soft city lights after the third. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. We married less than a year later. I told myself that when you know, you know. But what I didn't know was how quickly love can turn into ownership. It started small, a casual, "I don't like when you talk to male coworkers." Then it was, "Why are you still texting old friends? Don't you know how that looks?" I stopped seeing my friends as often. Stopped answering texts unless he approved. He said he just wanted to protect me, to keep me safe. I believed him, until the night I texted an old college friend a simple, "Happy birthday." Brandon saw it and lost control. I can still hear his voice, low and dangerous. "You think I'm a fool? You think I don't know what you're doing?" His hand struck my face so fast I didn't even process it until I tasted blood. I convinced myself it was stress from his job as a police officer. He protects people all day. Of course he's on edge, I thought. I even apologized for making him mad. But apologies didn't stop him. Over time, his anger became routine. Dinner slightly cold, a shove into the counter. His shirt not ironed perfectly, my arm twisted behind my back. Once, when Sophie was still an infant, I set a glass of water on the table and he screamed it was too warm. Then he threw it at the wall an inch from my head. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was the way he could switch instantly from rage to calm and then act as if nothing had happened. And he had power. Brandon might have been suspended from the force for excessive force, but he still had connections. He knew how to intimidate people, how to make things disappear. The night I whispered, "Maybe I should call the police," he leaned down so close I could smell the alcohol on his breath and said, "If you ever call them, your boy won't live to see morning." I froze. Ethan was only 10 then, sitting in his room, wearing headphones and playing games, unaware his father had just weaponized his life. From that night on, I stopped thinking about escape, until Sophie came along. She was just a baby, sweet and fragile. Something about holding her in the crook of my arm and seeing Ethan's protective hand resting on her tiny foot cracked something inside me. I couldn't imagine them growing up thinking abuse was normal. Still, leaving Brandon seemed impossible. He controlled our bank accounts, knew everyone in our neighborhood, even had neighbors who admired him. They didn't see the man who slammed my head against the fridge for buying the wrong cereal. They saw Officer Brandon Spencer, community hero. But little by little, the idea took root. When he called me worthless for the 100th time. When Ethan stood in a doorway watching with a clenched jaw. When Sophie cried at sudden loud noises. I began to see it clearly. Staying would destroy us all. That was when I started to plan in secret, in silence, with shaking hands and a heart that finally whispered enough. The decision to leave wasn't a single moment of bravery, but 100 small steps, each one more terrifying than the last. I started with cash. Grocery store trips became my secret lifeline. Every time Brandon sent me for food, I added a 20 to the withdrawal and hid it in an old music book. He never checked those. Music was my world, not his. In a month, I scraped together a few hundred. Not much, but enough to start. Next came my job. I loved teaching at the community music school, but Brandon hated it. He said it kept me distracted, as if nurturing young musicians was an insult to him. I told the director I was exhausted, needed a break to focus on family. She gave me a sad smile like she knew more than she let on. Leaving that job hurt, but it gave me an excuse to stay home. Less risk of Brandon tracking my movements, I transferred Ethan to online schooling. The excuse was health concerns. The truth was, I couldn't risk him talking about our plans to anyone. Sophie was too young to understand. But Ethan looked at me with those big gray eyes, so much like Aaron's, and simply said, "Okay, Mom. Whatever we need to do." Just thinking his name brought a pinch of pain and a flicker of warmth. He was my first real love. A pianist whose music could silence a room. We were barely more than kids when we fell into something reckless and beautiful. And then I let him go. No, I pushed him away because he deserved a life free from my chaos. Free from being tied down. I never told him I was pregnant. When Ethan was born, I stared into his eyes and saw Aaron in every glance. I told myself